Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Art and Talk is an online interviewing platform for artists to share their art, creativity, and passion. We embrace all the arts, the traditional arts and the spiritual arts, to bring you diverse and quality interviews to watch and be inspired by. We hope you'll stay connected with us on social media. On our YouTube channel, we have approximately somewhere around 60 artist videos for you to watch and for you to be inspired by. So do stay connected with us on YouTube, Art and Talk, and also on our Facebook page as well. If you're watching this and you're an artist and you'd like to be interviewed on Art and Talk, you can reach us a couple of ways. You can send an email to us at viewoftheartist@gmail.com, or you can just touch base with us, message us on our Facebook page, Art and Talk, and we'll get back to you with scheduling and information. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. And again, thank you so much for watching and tuning in with us today. Today we have a guest poet, and we'll be finding out all about her poetry and her poetic journey, and also about her book as well. So thanks again for watching, everyone. And I'd like to welcome our guest artist for today, Stephanie Holzhouser. Hi, Stephanie, welcome.
Hey there, Sue. How are you doing today?
Good, good. All right. Well, we have our customary opening of the show. And since you're a poet, if you're ready to read one of your poems, we'd love to hear it, Stephanie.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite pieces, and it's also the kickoff of a few other projects that I have coming up. So, what inspired me to write this poem for this book is I'm also working on my first novella book, and this was one of the inspiring pieces. As I was working on that, I came up with this poem, and which also started leading me to the thought to write my book called The Taste of Passion. So he was finding my weak spots, so afraid to ever speak. He knew the embraces as he felt my heart pounding, sweaty palms. I tried to hide the way his fingers would gently touch my neck. I couldn't help but quiver. He thought it was endearing. Chasing me was like an adventure. The girl with hidden inhibitions, where a smile would make me blush. I couldn't even kiss those lips, but every time they spoke, I couldn't help but wonder what they could do. I just waited patiently, hoping he would see I had no control with him. He didn't have to try. I was already his, just too afraid to admit it. His words were like corn to me. Um, and like I said, that's the kickoff. That poem was inspired from another book that I'm writing right now. It's still a long ways to go, probably at least a couple of years before I can go ahead and get it published. And it just this piece started inspiring me to write the book, where I started coming up with some more pieces. And this book actually wasn't even planned for me to do. It's just once the ideas got going, it just didn't stop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And tell us, Stephanie, about this particular poem. I mean, we kind of get a feeling of what's going on and kind of your thoughts and the other person. But tell us in your words. Give us a little like your insider info into what the poem's about, if you would, please.
Um, Really, it's a reflection. It's a reflection of my younger years. You know, not so much of something that had occurred with another person, but I was incredibly shy when I was younger. You know, I would be quick to blush, very, very nervous, and just that girl hiding behind my hair. Oh, sorry, child. And I was just very shy and very skittish when I was younger, and um, found it very hard to be vulnerable. Give me one moment. Hey, go play. Go play. So that's what that poem is about.
Mm-hmm. So this is, it's not a recent poem. It's more of a reflection of your sort of feeling inhibitions and feeling the different words that you described, like feeling a little bit more shy and maybe not vocalizing your feelings and whatnot. That's kind of in the
Right.
ballpark. Okay. Okay.
Exactly. And I actually wrote it last year. So even though it was a reflection, but it was just trying to dig a little deeper into, just some past thoughts and just talking about them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And have you found, Stephanie, that through your writing, that you've kind of developed more of a confidence and developed more of a voice? Has your poetry, helped that sense of empowerment and confidence within you since you've been writing?
Definitely. It's helped me grow as a person. I'm not that shy person anymore that I used to be. I have my moments, but it's helped me build a confidence and a better sense of myself over the years too.
Mm-hmm. Do you want your child to come in? Because I see his little head peeking.
He's being nosy.
Yeah.
He's being very, very nosy. Hey, you're supposed to go play. I told you I'm busy. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Oh, okay. He wants to be in the video.
I'm sorry.
Oh, and what's his name?
Patrick.
Patrick. All right, Patrick. Hi.
Can you go play for me, please? Go play. Go on. Go on. I put your food out. Go play. Oh, okay.
All right. That's okay. We'll just
When you're a mom and an artist. Hey, go play, please. Please. Give me one moment. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
I love you too. Go play. Go, 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 go. Go play. Patrick, go play. Go play. I'm so sorry. He has autism, so he doesn't really understand boundaries sometimes.
Mm-hmm. No worries. No worries. All right. So we were at the poem that you opened up with. So it's a reflection, and you wrote it last year, but it was from when you were a bit younger. And then we were just kind of discussing that your sense of shyness has really become alleviated through, at least in part through your poetry and writing, you were saying.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Being shy and being that girl with that was just hiding and too afraid to be vulnerable, writing that's what made me start to write, so I could work through those emotions, those feelings, and those thoughts and process what I needed to. And I just didn't expect it to take me down this road that it's took me down. Mm-hmm. As a writer or as a poet.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, Stephanie. So you approached poetry from the onset as you sort of had like a precognitive thought that, okay, I think that this is going to help me get over my shyness and kind of maybe, develop your feelings, your thoughts, kind of lay them out and kind of assess them and work through them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, not right away, but later on it did. I mean, I've been writing since I was 10. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't even start with poetry. I started with writing articles for my schools before I went into poetry. And then we had a project as I got older in school where we had to write 10 different forms of poetry and we had to present them in the class. And that's when I figured out that I was a poet. because I had a teacher approach me. She told me, she's like, you need to go with this. You need to keep writing poetry. And then I never stopped.
Mm. That's beautiful that you had that teacher to encourage you and really kind of point you in the direction of poetry.
Very much so.
hmm And you were saying you didn't know where your poetry journey was going to take you. So if you could bring us up to speed, where has it thus far taken you?
Um, in a lot of places I didn't think it would.
hmm
So I wasn't really sharing my poetry publicly until about 2 years ago. And I had a friend, and her and I were kind of competitive in journalism class back in high school. And she was one of the only people that had ever read any of my poetry for the most part for a long time. And she had challenged me because she knows I thrive on a challenge. And she told me, she's like, I bet you if you published a book of your poetry, it would go really viral and you'd be surprised. And I was like, nobody wants to read my poetry. It's just my personal thoughts and that's it. And so I did publish a book. I've actually published three. My first two I took down because I want to revise them and then I'll release them at a later date. So the first one I had published was called Our Greatest Sin is Lack of Expression. And I published it and I needed to make it cleaner and stuff, but I just threw it up and I told her, I was like, no one's going to read it. And what ended up happening is in 6 months, it sold 300 copies. And I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. And that's when I decided to start sharing more of my work. And I was like, okay, maybe it's time to start sharing these writings and see what happens and see where it takes me. And in that time frame, I've had poet interviews with Matthew Whiteside on his YouTube channel. I've been on the interview with the poet for the South Florida Journal. And I've also been published in Open Skies, Raven Cage magazine, and it's been a very interesting journey along the way. It's kind of been very shocking to know how far it's come just in a matter of 2 or 3 years so far.
hmm Yeah, that's a lot of accomplishments in a short amount of time, especially when you kind of started, Stephanie, with the premise of like nobody's going to read my poetry, but yet that's absolutely hasn't been the case.
No, it hasn't been at all.
And I love that title. I thought that was really a fascinating title. It was Our Greatest Sin is our our lack of expression.
Lack of expression.
Say that one more time.
Mhm.
Can you just repeat that
Our
one?
greatest sin is lack of expression.
Beautiful. That's so well said. Tell us a little bit more about some things in your poetic journey, and then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the image that we have of your book. Tell us a little bit more about perhaps some of your inspirations. Where do you draw your inspirations from? And also kind of get into the reflective nature that you have, if you would, please.
Oh, wow, that's so hard to answer where I draw my inspiration from. Um, I've always been a artist in different forms and different medias all my life. Um, I grew up with a lot of inspirations. Both of my parents were artists, musicians, and writers themselves, and my brother as well. And music is definitely one of the ones that drives me, especially coming from a background of a bunch of musicians, just listening to the flow of the beats, the music, in silence, just going over my daily thoughts and everything. But if I'm being perfectly honest, experience is where a lot of inspiration comes from. Um, Reflections or just um, I guess one of my biggest inspirations would be that it fascinates me that um, so many people are afraid to be emotional or express themselves. So when I write, one of my greatest inspirations is to incorporate that into my writings, because I feel like it's important, it's a necessity, it's a part that we keep hidden away sometimes. But other art inspires me, even paintings, um, people who draw, just everything, and being a part of artist communities, is one of the biggest things that inspire me. And some of my rights, when I don't have the thought in my head when I'm writing them, but with an individual, another artist, and the conversation will strike an idea, a concept, a thought, maybe one that I've forgotten about, and re-inspired me to transform it into something.
Mhm.
So when I think of inspiration, I think of everything. It's what you see, it's what you hear, it's what you feel, it's what you speak. Um, it's just observing everything around you that can strike an inspiration if you're listening.
Yeah, yeah, that's really beautiful, Stephanie. I love how you express that. So the key elements for you in your poetry, your writing is first of all drawing inspiration from experience, whatever that is, and then also the emotionality. You like to bring that emotional component into your poetry, and you feel that most people kind of shy away from that, and you feel that that is kind of a key element to kind of getting into the flow, so to speak, of the poetry or the heart of the poetry. Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, what's the point of, I mean, there's over 50 different forms of poetry. You have written poetry, you have spoken poetry, and there's so many written styles. It's amazing. But um, to me, if I'm going to read something as a reader, I want to feel, I want to get a feel for what made them write that piece. I want to know that I could relate and that I can connect to it. And I think that that's something that we don't really think about sometimes. It's not just about reading words on a piece of paper or listening to words being spoken. It's about understanding, and just taking a moment to really listen without reacting for once.
Mm, that's really beautiful. I love that. Yeah, it's almost like a non-judgmental perspective and just kind of like being open as well.
Correct.
Hmm. Okay, so let's say you draw inspiration from all the arts. It sounds like from life in general, your experiences, emotions. You have just a real seem like authenticity and a realness about yourself and your poetry and what you're interested in. So let's say now that you're in writing mode and so you have your inspiration and perhaps you have your topic or your theme. Give us a little bit of insight into Stephanie writing her poetry, getting into the creative process, if you would, the environment, if that's important. What aspects are important to you when you're actually in that zone?
I know a lot of artists create this zone moment, whether it's them at home alone or dealing with feelings or expressions. But for me, there's not a moment in that. I can be walking down the street, come up with an idea or concept, playing with two lines in my head. And then when I get home, just let it flow. I just let it flow naturally. For me to sit in front of either a notepad or a computer screen and to go, okay, I'm going to create, feels forced. So for me, it's when that thought strikes my head. It's when that moment occurs. It's it's when it happens, and I know a lot of people have asked me that before, the creative process and thought thinking for me. And I can honestly say there's not one. There's that idea hits me and I go and I run with it. I don't, for me, it's hard because when I get ideas in my head, they're flowing so rapidly and so fast. So, it's when I'm the most active, when those ideas hit my head. It can be um in the morning when I'm running errands, something can occur. I heard about a friend, something, and that'll strike me to get in that creative process. It can be I'm helping another person, being there for them, listening to them, being an ear, and bam, the idea strikes me. And then, I just literally go with it and I write it down and I write down that thought. And that thought eventually ends up evolving into something that's a creative writer, a poem, or whatever it may be at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I love that. So it's a very spontaneous, it's a very organic, it's a very instant in the moment kind of thing, and it can come at any moment, and then you get those like, oh wow, okay, I've got this, like, these ideas are running around in Stephanie's mind, and then you're like, okay, boom, zoom. Now we've got to get into that writing, and now when you're in that space, you just let it excuse me, you just let it flow. um you just let the ideas develop. It sounds like it's a very organic kind of process. Do you just kind of stay in that space and let it happen? You come back to it the next day. What is that like for you typically?
I feel like if you have to force something and sit down and create this process, you're preventing yourself from being really creative. Because honestly, once you're in a flow of your idea, you can't stop it and go back to it. You can for some people, but for me, it's going to lose the meaning of what it really was, what it started with, and it will evolve into something different. And there's nothing wrong with that as a writer or an artist. But for me, you know, I want to write as natural as possible, which means writing in that moment when that idea hits me. And, that means playing with those two lines that often it begins with in my head, to where it just, you don't think, you just write and you get it down on that piece of paper. And to me, creating is like just letting it flow
Mm-hmm.
and being your most natural self anyways, because that's the best way to create. Just be yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then this seemed like it maybe naturally evolved as a an output of having some body of writing, because when you first started out, you were saying it was very reflective and it was really kind of overcoming some different challenges. So
Yeah.
then it kind of evolved to like, okay, Stephanie's out on a walk and she's inspired by the nature, the light, a conversation, something that you experience, and that feeling that you just seem to link up to is then the moment that you're going to go ahead and start to develop it from, like, as you were saying, it might just be a couple of lines and you just kind of see where it goes. You don't really give it much thought, kind of like coming from the heart, just letting it, like a river, you just kind of like let it come out.
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. We have the one of your books. We can go ahead and pull that up. Would you like to go ahead and discuss that now?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Very good. Give me just a moment and let me pull that up.
Okay.
Okay. Tell us what's going on with this, Stephanie.
This whole book, like I said, it was not, I didn't expect to write it, and it it's funny because, there was that piece I read earlier that kind of got the thought process there, but what helped create this book is I had a friendship with another poet, and him and I were discussing topics about how people don't connect anymore, and they don't peel back the layers. And we got into one of those spiritual, soulful connection kind of conversations over a course of weeks. And sometimes sometimes when you have those conversations with the poets, you get each other, you understand each other, and your backgrounds might be different, but there's something that is just a connection to you. And I started writing as we were having conversations about stuff back and forth. We were sharing experiences from our past relationships. We were talking about, what people don't understand, or how romance is lost, or how people are too afraid to open up to a certain extent intimately with their relationships. And that's where this book started getting created, is through those conversations. And some of the pieces I had already had written, and some of them were new ones that were created through our conversations and stuff. And it was not an expected book. It was one of those things to where the creative process took off from good conversations, understanding another person, and sharing stories. And just like that, this book ended up coming to life. And it wasn't planned, it wasn't expected, it just happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. It seems like a lot of things, Stephanie, are very like unexpected in your life. The whole poetic journey, this book, kind of like the way that you kind of attune to life and whatnot. And I find it really beautiful. All right, so give us a little more taste, so to speak, of some of the content, if you would, about this book.
So the content has, it's, yes, it has erotica in it, but it's very soulful content. It's, talking about the weakest spots to a person when they fall in love. It talks about intimacy that, is special between two people, and one of my favorite opening lines for this book is, I'll tell you. And you know a lot of people are so afraid to share themselves, and this opening line I thought was perfect for my book. um if it'll work for me. And everybody, when they get in relationships, they expect this type of perfection, but the truth is everybody's got baggage. Nobody is perfect. And there's parts of that in here that's soulful. Like there's a piece that talks about, women being fragile, or it's there's a lot of intimacy in this book. There's a lot of romance, there's heartbreak, there's erotica, there's a lot of pieces to it, um, that I think, it's scary to fall in love. It's scary to let yourself be vulnerable, and but it's worth it at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stop the screen share for just a moment, Stephanie.
Okay.
All right. So with this book, we get a really good feeling of what it's about, and you keep going back to you know how you feel that most people don't really open up with their emotions, and in particular cases in relationships, and here you are in a sense kind of setting the stage and saying, look, it's okay to, and I love that word you use, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to express your feelings. And again, we're looking in this particular case, although I realize you probably mean it across the board, in a relationship context. And you kind of cover in the book, it sounds like a lot of the different, relate love, romantic, erotica, all the different areas, heartbreak, that most people have gone through in different relationships. So is what you really like to kind of focus on and write about is kind of like the relationships and the interrelationships of what's going on, and almost like the way that you see it, and how you kind of want to change it. You kind of want to like transform it into something very real and authentic and honest, and to be vulnerable, and to have that voice. That's kind of like the vibe I'm getting. Let me know if that's in the right ballpark.
That's in the right ballpark. And I wouldn't say that's my focus as a poet. I would say it's one of my favorite areas that I like to write, that I like to relate to, that I like to understand, that I like to reflect on sometimes. I think for me, one of the reasons I like writing that and I like expressing that and I like making that a point is over the course of years, especially for women, men too, but a lot of my female friends, one of the most popular discussions we've had is it is so difficult to allow yourself to be vulnerable, to know if you should or you shouldn't, if you can trust that person. And it's a lot more difficult than people admit sometimes. And that's also why this book is important, because as you're reading it, it kind of gives you that chance to know that everybody kind of has that fear of being vulnerable and if they're going to be taken advantage of. And it's important that we remember that it's okay to take that chance sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, in essence, the message of this book. And when you write about relationships, you're kind of like opening that door, so to speak, to say it's okay.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit more about anything you'd like to share, Stephanie. But I'm also interested in what other topics and themes and whatnot inspire you to write about, other than the relationship aspect.
Um, I've written, actually, when I started writing poetry, the topic I wrote about the most was actually, things like that. And I started with first. Um, I like writing all topics. I don't like limiting myself. I think to grow as a poet, as a writer, as a person, and just in general, it's important to write in many different tones. So I write in relationships. My second book that I'm revising, which is called Shadowed by Her Truth, is dark poetry, relating to hardships, to discovering oneself, and to dealing with situations that make you a little bit stronger, and just everything. I like I said, I don't like limiting myself. Some of my favorite poetry is very heartbroken. I've even wrote poetry on forms of advocating, where I've written poetry regarding the journey of autism or the journey of ADHD. I've written about disabilities. I've written a lot of different topics over the course of years. Um, and I think that it's important to stretch yourself so you can become a better writer and a stronger writer over time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. Um, let's go ahead and look at the write-up that you had. I'll go ahead and pull that up, and if you can go ahead and share with us about that. Give me just a moment, I'll pull that up.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so what would you like to share? The South Florida Poetry Journal.
Yeah, that I was interviewed for that to find out a little bit of background of me as a writer. Here I shared something personal, and it's something I don't share a lot on my writing journey, and it states in my biography. As I expressed earlier, writing was a way that I found my voice, kind of processed information and stuff. But what I don't typically share, and it shares it here, is I had a hesitation of sharing my writing for years because I had a speech impediment. So I had a language disorder that I had with for a long time. And I shared that in this because I wanted other writers to know, because and other people to know that we all have our battles that we face, but it doesn't mean that we're not intelligent, that we're not smart, that we can't get things accomplished. And, like I said, I've written a lot of poetry over the course of years for advocating as well in different areas. And that's my heart, that's my passion right there, is letting people know that you don't have to be perfect to share your journey. And it was an honor to be featured in South Florida Poetry Journal and be interviewed by them, because I got to share some pieces of myself that I don't typically share. And it's kind of like I tell everybody, everything I write, you'll never know if it's based off of something that I lived personally or experienced, or it may have just been an idea that ended up evolving over time. It's for my readers to decide, was this real or was this just an idea? And that's part of the mystery of the writing some days. But I was really honored to be featured in this and share a part of myself with other poets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about this, Stephanie?
No, I mean, it was the kickoff and the start off to saying a little bit more of myself as a poet and what inspires me. And it was just an honor to be featured in that, and to, discuss, who was my favorite writer. They'd asked me questions like that. And one of my favorite writers is Emily Dickinson. And that's one of the poets that inspired me when I was really young, that made me want to keep writing. And it was also the poet that I related to the most at the time, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And what a wonderful write-up, and everything that you shared. Um, all right, so if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share.
Okay.
What I find really amazing about your journey, and so beautiful, and obviously it's a continuation, it's obviously not ending, it's just expanding, is that in
Right.
this short amount of time of what we've discussed, is that you went from someone very shy and not really having a voice to to being able to articulate yourself, through poetry, through writing, through all your different, avenues of expression and whatnot. And that you've come so far, like you open up to all these different parts of yourself. Like you've just went from A to Z, and it's a really beautiful thing to see. And it's just so encouraging, like these areas of yourself you're just so open with, and then you write about them, and these different topics that you're attracted to. It's like I can just see it keeps building, it keeps building and building, and I can really see how that's developed a strength within you.
Yes. It's been a journey, that's for sure, but it's been a very enlightening journey that I don't regret. And like everybody, every situation, whether it's good or bad, it's just it's another story to tell. It's just another chapter in your life.
Hmm. Hmm. What have we not touched upon in your poetry and your writing that you'd like to share?
Ooh, that's such a tough question. Um, I feel like I have a lot more to share, and that this journey is just starting to begin and unravel in a lot of forms, and I have a lot of stuff that's in plans and in for the works that I plan on doing and getting accomplished. I have some special projects that I'm not ready to announce yet, but that will be coming forth. And one of my biggest things that I plan on doing more in this journey is creating more poetry, more stories, and photography to go along with it in time. Um, Not yet, but over time, I plan on implementing that a lot more along with my writings.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That'll be an interesting combination, and kind of like keeping it fresh and kind of stretching, creatively to see what some new things you can come up with.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we're gonna need to close the show in just a little bit. Um, tell us some of the things that, I mean, there's, you have some projects that are going on, but they're kind of not ready to fully be announced just yet. And you have some of your book projects, sound like you were doing a little bit of revising and whatnot. I'm going to ask you a question that I've asked other poets, and I'm interested to find your take on it. And I know right or
Mhm.
wrong, just kind of get into the mind of Stephanie and see what you come up with. So as a poet, what do you feel that is the job of the poet? And I always use that word job very loosely, because I don't want to make it sound like a job, but just to get kind of the point across. Tell us in your own words.
I don't think there's just one job for a poet to accomplish. I feel like there's many things to accomplish. One, to understand oneself as a poet and why you write the way that you do and what's the purpose. And the other is to reach people, let people know, whether it's dark poetry, that they're not alone in the way that they feel, and that it's okay to fall weak sometimes, and it's okay to express yourself. As I said earlier, expression is everything. In poetry, for me, I want to make people feel comfortable and at ease to do that, to not have to wear a mask, to be who they are, be perfectly comfortable in their skin, and not care what other people think. Everybody is different, everybody is unique. We all have different reasons that we relate to each other and different purposes, but that doesn't mean our stories are the same. And that doesn't mean they're going to end the same way either. So I think it's important people are themselves without having to worry about judgment, no matter what. And there was something my father told me years ago, and I live by this saying: there is no such thing as a mistake. Mistakes are only lessons that we learn from.
Mhm.
And it's how we grow.
Mhm.
And I stand by that. There's no such thing as a mistake with a person. It's just another lesson they had to learn to grow as an individual.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great.
And
That's
it's
great
true.
advice from your dad. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I see Patrick has made a second appearance.
Yes, my other writer in the making,
Yes.
he likes his attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Sweet. All
Yes.
right. So we're gonna need to go ahead and wrap the show up. We'd like to leave you with the closing comments, whatever you'd like to share, Stephanie, and let us know how we can stay in touch with you.
Absolutely. So I'll close with one of my favorite sayings, and I actually posted it on my Facebook today. And it's part of a project that is going to be coming to life soon. And that is, I write a lot about strength, and I write a lot about overcoming things too. And I always say, a person's always told that they're really strong. But to be strong is to be weak. To be weak is to be strong. That there's more strength in expressing yourself rather than trying to hold up this facade just so, you know, another person can say you're so strong. But the truth is, sometimes the strongest people need to be weak.
Mhm.
And I stand by that statement. And that's going to be the kickoff of another project to come down in the future later on.
Mhm. Mhm. Very good. And how about how can we stay connected with you, social media and whatnot?
I have a page called Stephanie Lynn Holtzhouser. It's my Facebook page. It's where I post some updates. And I believe I also shared it with you. I have a podcast linked where you can find me. It's called Chameleon's Truth. I share spoken poetry on there. I also have guests come on and join me from time to time on that podcast, talking about their poetic journey, or whether they're storytellers, sharing that journey as well. And we discuss various topics and what drives them to write the poetry that they write. And sometimes I have discussions on there to where it's just me and we're picking apart emotions and we're discussing them and getting to the root cause of them and sharing my own journey as well in that podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's great. I love your raw honesty, Stephanie, and I love your almost like fearlessness, and I love how you have developed yourself. I mean, I'm just sitting back here, kind of like applauding you. It's so beautiful, and I know that there's so much more to come, and I appreciate you sharing all that you shared with us and coming on Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being our guest poet.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to some of the new projects that you'll have out. We'll be interested in checking those out as well. All right, thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. I look forward to showing them when it's time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Art and Talk today. Again, stay connected with us on social media, on our YouTube channel and Facebook page, and we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed. Stephanie, thank you again. Thank you again, everybody, for watching.